Planet Vero Studios, brought to you by Evergreen Media, creating cohesive marketing campaigns. Evergreen Media in Vero Beach.
Honestly, without Treasure Coast Community Health, I think we'd be a much poorer community in terms of our health. We're always striving to fill the gap for everyone in the community, rich or poor.
And welcome to Community Conversations. My name is Vicki Soule, and I'm the CEO of Treasure Coast Community Health. Now, many of us around town recognize the TCCH buildings because there are 8 or 9 of them, depending on whether you count our administrative buildings or not. But we provide primary medical, dental, behavioral health, pharmaceuticals, sort of a one-stop shop. We're private practice supersized. While we are a federally qualified health center, that doesn't mean that we have a straight pipe up to Washington for federal funds. We actually have to compete for them every 3 years, and they consist of about 18% of our annual budget. The rest of it mostly comes from our own patients. So thank you, those of you that have been regulars at Treasure Coast Community Health, for helping keep yourselves healthy, as well as for keeping TCCH financially healthy. But, you know, things are more than just about our own medical care. If that were the case, we'd have a pretty boring 6 days of the week, excluding the one that we might show up at a doctor or dentist's office. So we do a lot of collaboration. We do a lot of networking with individuals and agencies around the community. And so today I'm so thrilled to have someone who's involved in Rotary. Now, Lynn Kenney has been in Rotary for 35 years. So I don't worry about any questions I'm going to ask her. But Lynn, many people don't even know about Rotary. Help fill in the blanks.
Well, that's true, Vicki. Thanks for having me here today. And if you see me shaking, it's because I have essential trimmer. The wonderful part is I'm burning up 250 calories while I'm doing this interview. So let's talk about Rotary a little bit. Okay. Rotary is the largest and most successful for membership and humanitarian service organization in the world. They have 1,000,002 members, and it's in 200 countries.
That is really phenomenal. When you think about how it started, like all organizations, very small, those are huge bragging rights.
Yes, it started in 1905 with Paul Harris in Chicago, and there were only 5 businessmen. And then it grew to both the national organization and then in 1912, the International Association of Rotary Clubs. Uh-huh. And that's when Rotary clubs from different parts of the world were included in Rotaries.
And so have women always been involved in Rotary?
No, I can say definitely not. If you look back, you kind of have to get your mindset back on those times. And in those early years, there were not a lot of women in work. There were not a lot of women professionals.
And we didn't even have the right to vote at that point in the early 1900s.
The movement for women in Rotary took 76 years, from 1911 to 1987. Whereas the right to vote took only 72 years, which was 1848 to 1920.
Well, sometimes it takes a body a bit to find its place. And
yes.
So women came out of the kitchens and out of the child care business as their sole entity, and then started doing service projects, being part of Rotary.
That's right. When women... Actually, what happened is women weren't allowed in Rotary clubs back then, so they just formed their own clubs, almost identical to Rotary, and appealed to have Rotary let them have clubs. So there were clubs in Duluth and Minneapolis, and then I recently found a very large group of women in Rotary, business women, in Cincinnati that existed from 1914 to 2008
Wow.
under the radar of Rotary. They just ignored Rotary and decided they were keeping that name in the club.
That is so cool. So you obviously have become a great historian of Rotary, particularly women in Rotary, and in fact did a YouTube video not all that long ago about the little mouse that roared.
Right. I did a YouTube because I had done a lot of research on women and Rotary, and I created The Mouse That Roared, the history of women in Rotary since 1911. And as part of that, I'll give you a couple of funny stories.
I'd love it.
Back in 1921, for pioneering women in Chicago, they got together with 59 women, the wives of Rotarians of the Rotary Club of Chicago, and they formed the Chicago Women of Rotary. And Rotary said, oh no, you can't use that name. So they did what all good wives, mothers, daughters, and sisters of Rotarians would do. They totally ignored them. And
that had to be some very interesting household conversations that were happening in Chicago during those years.
I'm sure there were a lot of conversations, and the group grew to about 250 members until Rotary allowed for women's auxiliary groups. And then they formed the Women of the Rotary Club of Chicago.
That is too funny because as a Rotarian, we've had multiple conversations about the Rotary wheel and what it needs to look like, if there's any marketing material or advertisements in general about events. And they're very, very particular. So there's still a bit of the, shall I say, organizational strife that goes on between common sense and these are the rules, ladies, and you got to follow them.
Oh, yes. It definitely was a real change when women were finally allowed in Rotary, but it took a Supreme Court case to make that happen. And
isn't that interesting?
Well, the story behind it is a very small club, the Duarte Rotary Club in California. They only had 10 members.
Oh.
And they wanted to grow their membership, so they brought in 3 women. And the district governor for Rotary at the time said, when you send their name in to Rotary International, only use the initials of their first name. But a year later, they were celebrating their anniversary for the club, and there they were, front and center, these 3 women with a Rotary International person there. And they said, you either eliminate their membership or we will drop your charter.
Well, I guess that didn't go over so well.
No, the club was not happy about that. And even though they made many appeals, they filed a lawsuit with LA Superior Court. And that wasn't ruled on till 1983, and it ruled against them. But they brought that to the Appeals Court of California, and it ruled in their favor in 1986 that, citing the Unruh Act, which is against any discrimination in the workplace, and a lot of the people in Rotary were getting their dues paid by their companies. So it made sense, but what that did is it meant that women could only become Rotarians in California.
Oh,
yes.
Well.
So, but Rotary International did not like this, so they took this to the Supreme Court of California, which refused to hear it. So it had to go to the Supreme Court of the United States.
And so that, of course, takes some time. And so those intervening years, that was before my time, I have to admit. But just because I was up in the Daytona Beach area at the time as a working individual, they sent me to go out to all the service clubs to tell them about the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life, and I was not gained admission. I said, can't I come in and talk to your group? No, I don't want to be a member. I just want, no. I said, okay. So I had to go find a man to tell them about the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life. So good job, California.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And Rotary clubs appear to be it in so many places, but different sizes and different talents come into those clubs. What's been your experience with that? You've cited 2 small clubs and some that have been in existence for a very long time.
Yes, a lot of clubs have formed both in the United States and outside of the United States. And right here in the Treasure Coast, we have a number of Rotary clubs, and we have 3 right here in Vero Beach, plus Orchid Island, Sebastian, Fort Pierce. So there are a lot of opportunities. And what I tell people is, if you love service to your community, because clubs usually do most of their work with the community, or you like international work because we do all sorts of projects around the world with water and sanitation, maternal health, peace and conflict, many different focus areas that we do. So there's something for everyone if they have any interest in checking out Rotary and joining a Rotary club.
Well, we're going to pursue that after a word from our sponsors, because there's lots more behind that information.
Okay.
Hang in there, Lynn. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Treasure Coast Community Health in-house pharmacies have the lowest prices in Indian River County, even lower than big box pharmacies. Taking your medication as prescribed leads to better health. Affordable medicine makes it easier. Treasure Coast Community Health patients can pick up medicine as they leave the office or use free delivery and mail order services. Pharmacists are always available to answer questions. Switch to TCCH pharmacies. Save money, stay healthy. 772-257-8224 and ask about our price match.
Good morning, angels.
No, not that kind of angels. These are honky-tonk angels. Tough, gritty, love good, love bad. Foot-stomping angels. Life stories in the music. The story of 3 gutsy girls following their dream to Nashville. Over 30 classic country hits. On stage at Riverside Theater starting May 30th. But you don't have to wait. Get your tickets now at the box office or riversidetheater.com.
ITEX, or International Trade Exchange, is the largest barter company in the world, with over 25,000 members offering goods and services. We're a marketing company that brings you new business in the way of trade, with over 200 local members enjoying the benefits of ITEX, like lawyers, doctors, plumbers, media, printing, and more.
Hi, this is Liz Bowler. Contact me and find out why barter through ITEX has been smarter for over 30 years. 772-532-1881. Visit itex.com. Time to take on those spring projects. Sturgis has lumber, hardware, and paint supplies. There's no reason to go out west to the big box stores. Sturgis is at 4645 US 1 Vero. Forget that traffic and shop local. Sturgis Lumber and Hardware. More than just lumber.
Start your day with fuel in your tank with breakfast at Marsh Landing. You'll love our biscuits and gravy, sweet potato pancakes, or eggs Benedict with a fried green tomato. And how about a mimosa or a monster Bloody Mary? It's breakfast, old Florida style, at Marsh Landing in Fellsmere.
And welcome back to Community Conversations. If you're just joining us, I'm Vicki Soule from Treasure Coast Community Health. And this week I have as my guest Lynn Kenney, who is a Rotarian, a Rotary person of 35 years membership. And so in addition to having lived the Rotary life of service above self for many years, Lynn has dedicated herself to the mission of the history of Rotary and how different things have happened at different times, and reviewed with us that originally and for many years, 76, 79 years, women were not allowed in Rotary until a small community in California challenged it by adding 3 women. And then, having been found out some year later, went on to defy the rule that said women couldn't be and took it on a legal path, which ultimately you say ended up at the Supreme Court?
Yes, it in May 4th of 1987, that's when the Supreme Court actually ruled on this whole thing about women in Rotary. It was unanimous. The vote was unanimous, 7-0.
Wow.
2 abstained because Sandra Day O'Connor had a husband who was a Rotarian.
Oh, and so we're right back to the home arguments.
That's right. And Harry Blackman was an honorary Rotarian, so they abstained from the vote. But what was interesting about this, it didn't just affect Rotary. It affected all service organizations. The only thing it didn't rule on is private clubs and private service or private organizations, and that had to be done by state. But this ruling only affected women going into Rotary clubs in the United States.
I was going to ask you that because Rotary International has service clubs throughout the entire world. You said some 200 plus. And so how did that affect, or did it affect, clubs in England or Germany or South Africa?
Well, it wasn't until 2 years later in what is called for Rotary the Council on Legislation, where they look at rules that they have for the International Rotary. They looked then, and that's when they voted in 1989 to allow women in around the world in any club.
So in your international exposure, because I know you do travel, and certainly the district governors will come to the United States prior to their term for a learning session, so we are able to talk with individuals from around the world. Do you know of any clubs that still preferentially have men at the helm?
Well, you'll definitely run into clubs that have all men. Japan is still a country that has a lot of men's clubs. They've been very slow to allow women in. And in Indonesia and Thailand, they have some all-women's clubs.
Really?
And as long as they do their service and follow anything about Rotary International, then they're allowed to just exist like that.
And most recently, on the cover of a magazine, what did we see?
We now have the first woman, Jennifer Jones, first woman president of Rotary International. So it's taken a long time.
A long time.
And then 2 years from now, we're going to have the second woman, Stephanie Urchak. And I should say, because I think this is very significant, that when the Duarte Club ruling came, the first person that became president after that ruling in California was Sylvia Whitlock, an African-American woman from Jamaica. And
that's a long way from home, from Jamaica to California.
She was a long way, but Dr. Whitlock, who was in education there, she sort of broke the barrier and became the first woman president of any Rotary club in the world.
That is amazing. And 3 cheers to all the Rotarians, but especially the women that have hung tough. And they're great organizers for many of the events and special activities. So I want to talk about club membership just for a moment.
All right.
Because it's certainly where we've gone in this journey on the mouse that roared, adding women to the mix. At some point, membership has also expanded into younger ages. So let's talk about first, what are the existing membership rules, so to speak? If someone wanted to be a Rotarian, are there qualifications?
Well, Rotary is really relaxed their classification. They called it classification system, where they'd have a lawyer or a certain kind of business person. Now they have people that work with nonprofits. They have people that are retired from work. and want to do service. And so they approach people in Rotary and say, you know, I'd like to really check out Rotary and what it's all about. And they're invited to come as a guest so that they can come to a Rotary club. And there's ones at early morning, and I belong to the Sunrise Rotary Club. There's ones that meet at noon. There's ones like the one you're in, the Oceanside Club, that meets in the evening. So there's time of day for anyone that has an interest, that has the passion, and I have a true passion for community and especially international work.
So you mentioned before our break that some of the projects involve fresh, clean water, sanitation, mother and children's health, peacekeeping. I think there's 5 domains, but I think those are probably the 3 that, as Americans, we tend to collaborate with their home nation. So you just went to Guatemala this past year. Can you give us a 1-minute update on that?
I did. We went down there with a team, and this time we visited 7 different projects, including a school for disabled children. And one of the projects was to work with the Mayans in the highlands of Tecpan. And we worked side by side, the families, to build gray water filter systems. And that's just, we've been there, we've built latrines, we've painted schools. We do a lot of work with the Rotarians that are in other countries. In this case, it was Guatemala. And
a very poor nation. And, you know, you introduced that subject to our club as the city living on the dump. They literally scavenge the dump.
Yes, one of our recent projects was to supply all the furnishings for a community center for those that live at the garbage dump, which is about 40,000 people in Guatemala City.
So outstanding work. One size does not fit all. Any interest or passion that you might have can be found somehow within the Rotarian group. And it's so good to know that the history continues to evolve. We have younger people in college, and one set up now, the Interact Club, or is it Rotaract? I get them confused.
In college, we have the Rotaract.
Rotaract's in college.
And in high school, we have the Interact clubs.
So again, if you are one of those that would like to find a way to be productive, regardless of your personal bent or occupation, give us a holler, and you'll be invited as one of our guests, because it continues to evolve and grow and meet humankind's needs. So thank you, Lynn, so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Vicki.
And thank you all for being present. I know sometimes it's difficult to figure out what we're going to be talking about. That's because our guest list is constantly changing depending on people's availability. But we do try to bring a nice mix to the table in terms of things that are happening in our country, and especially in our county of Indian River. Great place to live. And so next week we will be talking with some folks from Healthy Start. So please dial in again on Saturday at 4:30. And in the meantime, have a great week. Bye-bye now.